Good evening. Last lesson tonight. We've talked about a variety of different things, but the overall concept and the overall theme has been, why should I care? And so at the teen study, we talked about just the idea of caring in general. And really, one way to look at it is you have two choices in life. You can go through life apathetic, or you can go through it caring. Now, people who are apathetic, who they don't care about things, if they go through their life that way, they never really get hurt, right? But they also never really enjoy life or get to enjoy the highs. So there's no lows, but there's also no highs. And that, by the way, is the life that so many people are choosing today. We've figured out that the key to living the most kind of mundane life is to spend our lives watching everybody else live through a computer screen. That's what we've done, is we've now said, let me just move to the next thing, and after about 2-3 seconds, I get bored with that, and then I move to the next. But you get to enjoy somebody else climbing Mount Everest, but you yourself never climb any Everest. You get to watch somebody else fix a car, and you get the benefit of, by watching somebody else fix up a classic car, you don't have any bruised knuckles because you never had to turn a wrench. You don't have any grease underneath your fingernails because you didn't have to do any of that. You don't have any frustration over rust that held things in place and you had to work for 4 hours to turn one bolt and remove it. But you know what you also don't have? You never actually got the enjoyment of turning the key and the engine rumbles up. You didn't do it. And so this is what we've done, as we have become a society that has access to everything and cares about nothing. Now be very careful, because if you don't watch it, the same attitudes that we apply to things like car repair, or we might watch, you can tell what my feed is, car repair, woodworking videos. My father was a woodworker, so every single woodworking video shows up for me. I try and actually go out there and make some sawdust from time to time as well. But whatever it is that you're watching, that sort of like, I watch and I enjoy the life of a voyeur, but never actually do the thing. I watch guitar, but I never learn to play guitar, and I never get the calluses under my own fingers. You can actually do that with your spiritual life too. Never before in the history of mankind have you had access to more sermons. You can listen to sermons all day long, and not just any old sermons, like the best ones from the best speakers. I mean, I can give you a list of 10 guys who are all easily leagues better from the pulpit than me, and you could easily go to their congregations and listen to every sermon that they've ever done, and you could spend the rest of your life listening to sermons about how to be a Christian. Listen to your car, listen to them while you work, listen to podcasts that are religious and spiritual, do all of those things, and then you know what you've done? You've done all of that stuff, but you've not actually gotten your own hands dirty. This is my deepest concern for the church, is that we have become so saturated in religious knowledge. You can study as much as you want, or have people tell you about spiritual things all you want, but actually going out and living it, that's the part that you've got to do and nobody can do for you. Apathy does not always look like not paying attention. It can sometimes look like all I do is hear, but I never do. And that is exactly what James warns us against. Be wary of becoming a hearer, but not a doer. So here is a doer passage. Galatians chapter 6, down in verse 10 says, "So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." This is a do passage, right? Let us do good, and there's two groups you're going to do good to. Everyone, which is a pretty big group, and especially put some focus on the household of faith. That is, other Christians, other disciples of Jesus Christ. Now, this passage is your do passage. So I want you to go out and do this, But if you want to understand why you should do that, you've got to back up a few passages. Because here's the thing, every verse has context to it, including Galatians 6:10. Every verse has a picture around it, and don't just grab the verse on its own and say, hey, every Christian, you should go and do good to everyone, and especially those of the household of faith. That's true, that's the command. But if you want to know why it's true, you've got to back up, and the story starts in verse 7. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Why should I care about other people? Why should I spend my life trying to do good to everyone else, and especially the household of faith? Who cares? After all, that's going to be a lot of work. If you're going to do good to other people, it's going to cost you time. And the thing about time is it's more precious than money. It will cost you money too, but it'll cost you time. And time is more precious because you cannot make any more time. All the time you spend, whatever it is you spend it on, you will never, ever get it back. And I will also remind you, remember the whole computer screen thing? You will never, ever get it back. Be careful that we're not vicariously living other lives instead of the ones that are ours. So why should I spend my life helping other people, serving other people, doing good, especially since if there's one thing you learn pretty quickly is you do good to other people, they will not always do good back to you. Right? I have a friend, he loves the saying, no good deed goes unpunished. Right? You do good and everybody loves you for it? No. And we have the ultimate example of that in Jesus, right? Jesus went about doing good. He said it's more blessed to give than to receive. And yet, what did he receive for his giving? A cross, right? His name is, he also not only goes by the name of Jesus, but at one point he refers to himself as the man of sorrows. So what's the point? Why should I put myself through that when especially Jesus, who we just talked about, I'm supposed to love him and learn from him. Why on earth would I do what he did? Because I know where it took him. Well, that's Galatians chapter 6, starting in verse 7. So, starting in verse 7, he says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. This is a truth about all human beings, whether or not we like it. Just the way it is. There are certain things that are just the way they are. If you don't like gravity, you're going to have to find another planet to live on because gravity is just part of life here. If I let go of this remote, we all know what's going to happen. It's going to hit the ground. Well, what if I don't like that? In fact, sometimes I don't like gravity, right? Have you ever accidentally bumped something and knocked something on the floor and it broke? Well, gravity was not your friend in that moment, was it? Well, I don't like gravity. I wish it wasn't that way. Well, guess what? Whether you like it or not, gravity is. This is one of those things. It is a law of the spiritual life. It is a law the same as the law of gravity, the same as any other law of physics. This is a truth. Do not be deceived. Don't be tricked into thinking there's some other system. This is the only system. All of life is a harvest. It's just the way it is. For every single human being, all of life is a harvest. Now, there are many things in this physical world that I am convinced God put here so he could teach us something more important. We have some very clear examples of that, things like the rainbow. Well, we have a rainbow in the sky, and God tells us the most important part about the rainbow is not that it's beautiful and then the sky and all these things. What's the most important part about the rainbow? It brings with it a promise. It's a reminder of God's character. He will never flood the earth again the way he did in Noah's day. So here's something in the physical world that the only reason it exists is to remind us of something of God's character. I think sheep are that way too, by the way. Sheep, if you ask anybody who actually works with sheep, they are not the brightest animals. Now, they're cute and they're lovely and all those things, but they're not exactly, like, how well can sheep defend against the lion and the bear of David's day? Now, there are other creatures, there are other even cattle and livestock that can do a pretty good job. Sheep, not one of them. But all the things that Jesus said about sheep and shepherds, that is also true. I have a friend who I was a zookeeper, he's a zoo owner. He has his own personal zoo, and in Kentucky you can do stuff like that because we're free. And so he just started buying animals. Now he's got everything except for the lions and the tigers and the bears, but he's got giraffes and he's got zebras and all sorts of different things. And at one point he had sheep, and he said, sheep taught me more about Christians than anything else. They're constantly getting themselves into trouble, and guess who has to bail them out of trouble? Shepherd has to do it. Now, on the other hand, if you spend a lot of time around them, they will hear your voice and they'll come. They absolutely respond to their shepherd. And so they are deeply connected to you. That's another thing about sheep. Sheep, Jesus himself said, my sheep hear my voice. So I think sheep are another one of those things. Another thing that I think is that way is just plain old farming. Seeds. Growing things, being a gardener, being a farmer. The very nature of farming makes you understand several different major ideas. One of them is you're going to plant something, and whatever it is you plant, that's what's going to grow. There is a connection between what's planted and what grows. You know, if you plant watermelon seeds, you do not sit around waiting for a wheat harvest. It's just the way it is, right? You understand that. If you plant a seed of a certain type, you're going to get a plant that grows of a certain type. Now, in the beginning, that seed probably doesn't look a lot like it. In fact, I always think that's funny. If I laid a whole row of seeds out and said, I want you to connect what seed is to what plant, unless you really knew your stuff, you would have no way of making any connection. If you'd never seen a watermelon seed, would you think that thing made watermelons? They oftentimes don't look a lot alike, but they produce after their kind. The other thing is, it always takes time. It always takes time. Every single one of our kids who's ever tried to plant anything has done exactly the same thing. They plant it, they go back in the house, and a half hour later they go and dig it up and to see if it's grown. And every single time they're disappointed because it never grows like that. You have to let it be, let it cook, let it grow, let it do its thing, and eventually you will have a plant, but it grows in very small stages. The other thing is that growth is not always consistent. Ask any farmer who makes their livelihood with farming, because that's a very different thing when you begin to make your livelihood with farming versus, we just have this kind of pet garden in our backyard that's for fun. But if we don't grow any zucchini, we just go to the store, right? You're not dependent on it. A farmer is dependent on his harvest, and he understands there's certain things he can control, and then there's a lot that he can't. He cannot control the weather. He cannot control when the sun comes and how hot it is and all of the different variables. He's going to have to be very dependent upon the one who makes weather, which, by the way, who is that? It's God. There's a reason that historically farmers and farming families have been more religious, just historically in America's history, because every day of their life they recognize, I'm not in control. The one who causes the sun to rise and the clouds to come, he's the one I have to pray to for my harvest. And you have good years and you have bad years, but you always keep planting regardless. Because if I plant wheat, I may have a bad wheat harvest, but I'll still have a wheat harvest. If I don't plant wheat because I think the weather might be bad, guess what I'm guaranteed? I'll get no harvest at all. Be not deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. The reason it works this way is because God is a just God. Imagine for a second that God created the world in a very different way, where what you planted in your life had no connection whatsoever to how your life turned out. So if you were kind and patient and worked hard, that in general, you had no idea what it could be. Your life could turn out where you end up in jail for being kind and patient. Or you could end up President of the United States. Or you could end up dead in the river. And you didn't know how your choices would connect to anything. Imagine trying to raise your kids that way. Now, we understand that when you put the effort into raising your kids in a godly way, does that guarantee that they will become Christians? It doesn't, right? Because we talked about that earlier. Remember what Ezekiel says? Each soul's responsible for itself, right? I can raise my kids and teach them all the right things and give them all the right tools, and they can grow up and go, no, I'm going to do whatever I want. But which is a better choice? To raise them knowing the Lord, or say, just do whatever you want? Of course it's better to plant godliness in their life. In the same way, that is true in every area of your life. Look, God has a system for living. Does it always bear the crop that you want? No. Sometimes you don't get a great harvest. Sometimes you're nice to people and they're not nice back. Sometimes you serve others and they take advantage of you for it. One of the great problems that Christians have sometimes is they want to give and they want to help. Have you ever given to somebody and helped somebody and actually they ended up using that money or that help to do something wicked? Yeah. So the answer is don't ever help anybody, right? Oh, wait. Better to sow and have some of the seed not grow than to not sow at all. God is a just God, and He has told us, look, I've made the world in a certain way, so that in general you're going to find these things to be true. People who plant and attempt to grow in wisdom, guess what they grow up to be? Wise people. People who idolize money and make money their God and put all of their effort into money, guess what they grow up to be? Bad people whose lives are empty because money can't fill the hole. The thing that you plant is the thing that will grow. You plant selfishness, you will grow up, and eventually what grows in your life is loneliness. Because you made your whole life about you, and guess what is there when it's done growing up? Everybody goes, that's a selfish person, I want to be around them, and you're alone. See, whatever you plant matters. And He also tells you that you can plant whatever you want. This is the thing I wish we said more often and reminded each other of more often. You can do whatever you want with your life. I think sometimes what happens is people hear us preachers and we talk about you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do this other thing. And we tell you all the things that God tells you need to do. And so people walk away and they go, man, that guy's just telling me what I have to do all the time. No. You know what you have to do? You can do whatever you want. Adam and Eve, what did they do? God said, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What did they do? Ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They did whatever they wanted. Now, are there consequences? Yes, and we talked about that earlier. But God says, look, whatever you want to plant, you can plant in your life. But the one thing you shouldn't do is not think about what you're going to plant. Now, if you want to grow potatoes, grow potatoes. You want to grow wheat, grow wheat. You want to grow corn, grow corn. But what you don't do is just grab a handful of seed and just kind of throw it out there and then wonder what's going to grow up. And that is what most people do with their life. Most people spend their whole life just kind of doing whatever, and then they wonder how things turned out the way they were. You follow whatever society tells you is cool. And you do whatever society says is fun. Or you do whatever you think will make you happy in the moment, right? Now, that's a problem because are farmers happy in the moment? They're not happy in the moment. They're dirty and their hands are messy and they're tired and they're in the sun and all. But in the long run, they've got a crop. But we do whatever we think will be fun in the moment. We get focused on materialism. If I just had more stuff, if I got whatever the new thing somebody else has, if I had that, it was iPhone 57, whatever it is, whatever the latest fashion is, whatever that is. What other people are going on vacation, I'm going to go. If I just go on that vacation like they're going, if I could make that trip to Europe like they're going, then I'll be happy. And you chase fun. And then you wonder why you ended up with the crop you got. God has told us you can plant whatever you want. All I'm telling you is whatever you do, be thoughtful about it. And I suspect if more of us were just thoughtful about it, we'd make better choices. Because when you stop and slow down, you think, well, what do I want in my life? What do I want my life to look like at the end? Do I want to be alone and penniless and people don't like me? Or would I rather have children who cry at my funeral? Would I rather have a spouse that I held their hand as I was breathing my last breath, and they were sad to see me go, but they knew they would see me again someday because they knew where I was going, and they knew they were going to go there too. That, by the way, is why you should marry a Christian. There's a lot of different reasons that are good to marry a Christian, but let me tell you one of the biggest ones. If you love somebody and you're going to build a life where you're trying to love more and more and more and grow that love, there is no greater sorrow than to love somebody as much as you love your spouse and not know whether you'll ever see them again. Be careful what you plant. You make choices. You make decisions, and you got to live with them. The one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. You can farm for yourself or you can grow for God. These are the two choices in life. Now, in Galatians chapter 5, which I might mention, we're in Galatians 6. So when Paul wrote this letter to the Galatians, he didn't put the chapter markers in. It was just one big letter. It's not a surprise to me that in the same book where he's talking about your life is a harvest and what you plant matters, he also talks about the fruit of the Spirit. You know what fruit is? It's the harvest. Right? You plant a tree and the tree grows, and eventually when the tree is mature, it bears fruit. Well, what's the fruit of the Spirit when you grow for God? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now, here's the thing. You want to plant those things in your life because you also want those when they become mature. I want to die loving more than I love right now. I want to die having more joy now than I have right now. I want to die having more peace than I have right now. I want to die having more patience than I have right now. I want to die being kinder than I am right now. I want to have more goodness in my life, more faithfulness in my life. I want to be a gentler man on my deathbed than I am right now. I want to have more self-control on my deathbed than I do right now. Right now, there are things I struggle to say no to that are bad for me. This afternoon, I've been trying to lose some weight. This afternoon, Sam sent me home with some donuts that were left over from when we'd had breakfast with them. Those donuts are really healthy. And I ate 2 of them when I said I wasn't going to eat any of them. Now, you know what that is? That's a self-control problem. Now, it's not wrong to have a donut, but what happens when you've said, I'm not going to have a donut, and then you have 2? That's a self-control problem. Now, I'm not saying everybody who has a donut has a self-control problem, but I did because I told myself don't do it, and then I did. Now, I hope as I get older, I'll have more self-control so that the things that I want to do, I'll do, and the things I don't want to do, I won't. Don't you want that? I want to have more control over me. I want to be the kind of person that's kind and good and faithful and gentle. I want to be doing these things because, one, there's no law against them. Well, how do you get there? Well, you don't get to be a more peaceful person by venting your anger every time you get mad. You don't get to be a more kind person by choosing yourself instead of choosing others. You don't get to be a more gentle person by being rough with people because you were tired of dealing with them. See, if you want to be better at those things, what's the answer? Plant them. You plant those in your life, and that's where you go. Now, the flip side of it is so often what we plant in our life is selfishness and distraction and cowardice. You know, there's things we know that we should say and we don't say it. We plant these things in our life, and then we wonder why our life doesn't turn out the way it should. Your life's a harvest. That's all it is. It's not a complicated thing. One of the things that I absolutely love about the way that God has made this universe and the way He's made us is He's made it simple enough to understand. You don't have to have a theology degree to understand that if you plant anger, you don't become more peaceful. That if you're always doing whatever you want to do right in the moment, instant gratification, I want it, I get it, I want it, I get it, and you never tell yourself no, that you don't grow up and be more patient. You don't have to be a master in theology to understand that's just not how it's going to work. Your life, it's going to end up, and at the end of it, you're going to say, my life turned out like this, and if you ask why, the answer will be because of what you planted. It's really just that simple. The other thing to remember is you can grow the fruit of the Spirit, or you can choose your own passions and desires, but you can't do both. And that's the other thing that a lot of times I think we're trying to do is we're trying to grow both crops side by side. But that doesn't work really well. Because do you know what we call it if you have a good crop and then you have a bad crop and you intermingle them together? One of them is a weed. Because all a weed is the crop you didn't want. Now, in certain, you take something like morning glory. Now, when I lived in Washington State, morning glory was a weed because it just grew and grew and it grew all over everything. Blackberries, same way. They were a weed. I had blackberry bushes, and I'm not exaggerating. I had blackberry bushes in my backyard that were as tall, almost as tall as this ceiling. They would just grow and grow and grow, and you had to burn them out. Now, in other parts of the country, what do people think about blackberries? It's lovely. I'd love some blackberries. It'd be great, right? All a weed is the thing that you don't want. If I am growing two crops together in the same field, that means one of them's a weed. And Jesus even says when you have wheat and tares growing up together and I start trying to pull out the weeds, what happens when you pull the tares out? You're going to pull some weed out with it. So be very careful with not lying to yourself. Remember Galatians chapter 6, what does it start with? Do not be deceived. If you think you can live a double life, if you think I can plant this one and I'm going to plant the passions and desires of the world right intermingled with that crop, nope. One of them is going to choke out the other. And history tells us, life tells us, that when I purposefully plant wicked passions and desires right in the same field with righteous fruits of the Spirit, guess which one tends to get choked out? Wide is the gate to destruction. Little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. The wicked stuff tends to choke out the good stuff if you think I can plant them both side by side. Now, if you say to yourself, I'm going to be a good gardener, and sometimes I get some weeds in my garden and I have to pull those out, well, that's okay, right? Sometimes we have to learn from the donuts. But it's different when you tell yourself, I'm going to plant them both together. You see the difference? It's really important that we understand the distinction between, hey, sometimes I get weeds in my garden. Every Christian gets some weeds in their garden. and me saying I'm going to plant them both side by side and live a double life. Galatians chapter 6, down in verse 9, after talking about planting to the Spirit or planting the flesh, he says, let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. All harvests begin with barren fields. If there is something that is missing in your life, if you're looking at those fruits of the Spirit, and you said there's some of those fruits, you go, I am not very good at those. Those are really missing in my life. All harvests begin with a barren field. If you're not good at something, that's how every great person who's really good at something started. Anything in life. If today you don't know how to swim, and you want to be somebody who's good at swimming, the first thing you're going to have to do is go to a body of water, some sort of pool or something like that. And then you're going to get in that water, and as soon as you get in that water and you start taking lessons, which I would recommend, right? Don't just try and do it alone. I mean, you can. I've heard stories of you just shove somebody off and they'll figure it out. But in general, take some lessons. When you start taking those lessons and learning how to swim, how well are you going to do in that? It's going to be embarrassing. In fact, I know some people who didn't learn to swim until an older age, and they got a private swim instructor and went at times when the pool was empty. You know why? It was embarrassing. It was just really embarrassing because they're floundering around there trying not to drown. They look like a cat trying to get out of water. That's how everything is when you're not any good at it. You hit a lot of wrong notes. You splash around a lot. You make a bunch of mistakes. You step on your own feet. Every field begins barren. If there's things that are missing in your spiritual life right now, don't spend any time knocking yourself for it. That's not what the Lord wants you to do. What the Lord wants you to do is to get to doing good and not grow weary of it. And live on the hope that the system works. And there's several different ways that you can build your hope. One is if there's a character trait that you wish you had or a life that you want to have, find somebody else in the Lord's body that already has that life. And then you go out and you buy them a cup of coffee and say, how did you get from where you were to where you are? What was it like before? And they will tell you the same thing, every single one of them. Well, I started out like this. And they'll tell you stories about what their life was like in their early years, and you won't even believe them. Do you know, and my wife can attest to this, there was a time in my life where I swore like a longshoreman. Just constantly. Now, she knew me in high school, before I was a Christian. I didn't grow up in a Christian family. And so I, just like all the rest of my buddies, I cussed all the time. Constantly. My kids can't imagine that world. Because I'm not that guy anymore. But I started out as a barren field, and every single person who's good at anything, you're going to find that's exactly the way it was. They started out, and then they worked on it. The most patient people you know didn't start out that way. And so you look and you build that hope, and you trust that God's system works. Galatians chapter 6, down in verse 10. Remember how I said this is the conclusion of the matter? Life is a harvest. So why should I try and do good to others? Because life is a harvest. As we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. Why should you try and do good to other people? Because every time you do something in your life, you're planting something. That's the way it is. You see somebody in need and you try and help them, or you ignore them. Either way, you're planting something. You have an opportunity to listen to somebody and be a kind friend and be patient with them. You either do it or you don't, and either way you're planting something. We live in a world of people everywhere. And I might mention, in a world where AI is growing and growing and growing, you know what AI cannot replace? It can replace a lot of different things. There are going to be plenty of jobs, I'm sure, that go away because of AI. That's true. But you know what it will never, ever replace? Human connection. The more we live in a digital world, the more it's going to matter that you as a human being care about other human beings. Why should I care about others? Because your life is what you plant. And if you serve those outside, see, let us do good to everyone. Well, let's imagine I do half of this. I'm only going to do good to those who are outside. If I only serve those who are outside, guess what happens? I do a lot of good in the world, but I become disconnected from the church. And you'll meet people who are that way. They're good do-gooders. And they do lots of good for lots of people, and you think, man, they'd make a great Christian. But they're not connected to Christ. The flip side is you have people who only serve Christians. They kind of like huddle up with the church and they do lots of things with other Christians, but they never do anything with anybody who's not a Christian. They don't get involved in helping and doing good with their neighbor. Well, those people, they serve Christians, but they become disconnected from what the purpose of the body is. This is why we're supposed to do both. Because as God's people, we're a part of His body, and what's His body here for? To stay connected and healthy, but connected and healthy for what purpose? So it can do the work of the one who died for it, who came to seek and save that which is lost. Your life is a harvest, and it will grow what you plant. Live accordingly. At this time, we're going to have an invitation song. If you are not a Christian yet, and for some of you teens, that may not have happened yet. You have been thinking about it, or you certainly heard sermons about it. But today is the day. You don't have to know everything to become a Christian. You don't have to have it all figured out, but you do need to know this. You need to know that life without Jesus is not a life worth living. He is the way and the truth and life. And no one comes to the Father except through Him. If you believe that, it's time to follow Him and put Him on through baptism. If we can help you with that, please come forward as we stand and sing together.